Ukraine suffers massive overnight assault as Russia launches one of its largest drone and missile strikes. Yet after days of bracing for retaliation, Ukraine was hit with a devastating overnight attack by Russia, one of the most intense since the war began. Moscow launched more than 400 drones and at least 40 missiles across the country, killing at least 4 people and injuring nearly 24 more, including civilians in the capital, Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a full-scale barrage, saying almost all of Ukraine was in the crosshairs. Russian officials claimed the strikes were in response to what they labeled as terrorist activity by Ukrainian forces, though they were vague on whether this was direct retaliation for Ukraine's recent successful attacks on Russian airfields, strikes that reportedly caused significant damage. Interestingly, while the Kremlin has loudly condemned attacks on Russian railway infrastructure, blaming Ukraine, they've been oddly quiet about the hits on their air bases. Despite that silence, the message from Moscow came loud and clear overnight. The scale of the assault was staggering. Ukrainian cities were pounded by a mix of ballistic and cruise missiles, alongside hundreds of drones. Some of these weapons are notoriously difficult to intercept. Only top-tier air defense systems like the US-made Patriot can handle them. And even then, not all threats can be stopped. The attack was so widespread that almost the entire country was placed under air raid alerts. In the city of Lutsk, a hotel hosting members of the Ukrainian Olympic team was struck by a blast. One athlete captured video footage of the chaos, adding a chilling human perspective to the destruction. Russian drone production seems to have ramped up dramatically in recent weeks, enabling them to send waves of unmanned aircraft deep into Ukrainian territory. It's unclear whether this is the extent of Russia's retaliation or just the beginning of a larger campaign. What's also raising eyebrows is the reported phone call between Russian President Vladimir Putin and former US President Donald Trump earlier this week. According to Trump, he told Putin, "Sometimes you just have to let 2 kids fight it out," likening the war between Ukraine and Russia to a playground brawl. He suggested it might be better to let them suffer for a while before stepping in.
Sometimes you see 2 young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. And I gave that analogy to Putin yesterday. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering a lot because both sides are suffering before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart.
That analogy sparked outrage. Former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta slammed Trump's comments, calling it a complete abdication of leadership. Instead of putting pressure on Putin, he's essentially giving him a license to continue attacking, Panetta said. This isn't leadership, it's a green light to brutality. Panetta warned that unless the US and its allies firmly stand up to Putin, the violence will only escalate. History will remember this as a failure to stand up to a tyrant, he added. Meanwhile, geopolitical analysts believe this latest strike might not be the full extent of Putin's promised retaliation. Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, noted that although the damage was severe, it still pales in comparison to Ukraine's recent drone strikes deep inside Russian territory, which took out strategic bombers worth hundreds of millions. Bremer emphasized that even within Russia's tightly controlled media landscape, those Ukrainian attacks were a major embarrassment. Putin might see this as just the beginning, he warned. And while Trump may be stepping back from diplomacy, the US and NATO appear more united than ever. Yesterday, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with President Biden in the Oval Office, signaling renewed Western support for Ukraine. Despite recent uncertainty, military aid, intelligence sharing, and arms supplies are expected to continue. For now, Ukrainians remain on edge. With sirens still echoing across cities and the threat of more strikes looming, the war enters yet another dark and unpredictable chapter.